Hello everyone, my name is Segav Tzfati. I'm Director of Academic Programs at the Stanford Center for Professional Development.
Hello everybody, and my name is Jonathan Notman. I'm Director of Student Client Services, also at the Stanford Center for Professional Development.
Thank you all for joining us today. First of all, we'll start by welcoming you and congratulating you on choosing to take classes at Stanford University. We believe that you have created a unique opportunity for yourselves to join an intellectually demanding learning environment where success will be rewarded with a tremendous sense of accomplishment and personal growth. It's very important for us to mention in the beginning that the vast majority of students who are taking classes here are successful. Our goal with the presentation today is to share with you some of the advice and best practices that will ensure your success, to review policy, and to set the right expectations. In today's presentation, we're going to repeat common themes, and the reason you're hearing them again and again in this presentation today is not because we like to repeat ourselves, although we do, but also because it's really important, right? And experience has taught us that we cannot stress these things enough. We're going to start by talking a bit about what you need to know as an SCPD student, as a member of the university community, about university policy, important dates. We'll talk a lot about the exam monitoring process. And then we'll talk a bit about what's happening in the particular class that you're choosing to take, how to work with the teaching team, how to focus on class communications, what are the important dates at the class level. It's very important for us to repeat that communication is key. And ultimately, your success in our classes will be a function of how much time you invest. We'll talk a bit about time management, but really invest the time to get the most out of this wonderful opportunity. When you're taking classes with us at SCPD, when you're taking these classes at Stanford University, what you're doing is you're stepping into a classroom that's being taught on campus, and you're studying shoulder to shoulder with Stanford students. It's important for us to talk about our system and process here. In our classes, instructors rely on TAs to manage the class day to day. The TA teams are led by experienced PhD students and are comprised of graduate students who are well-versed in class concepts. Please make sure that you know who your TAs are, how to reach them, and when are office hours. When trying to communicate with your teaching teams, of course, copying the professor is a good idea, but copying the TAs or the TA is absolutely critical for making sure that your issue is addressed, that it is handled appropriately and on time. The workload here is something that we notice is often underappreciated, or students don't necessarily expect the workload to change the way it does. The academic calendar at Stanford is quarterly. That means that the pace of classes accelerates really quickly. We advise students not to expect the workload to remain at the level of the first week of classes. Typically, we suggest to students to plan for 2x or 3x the initial workload. The midterms in a quarterly system occur earlier than you might be used to if you've taken classes or your academic career has taken place mostly in institutions where the system is semester-based. We have found that in certain classes, students are spending 10, 15, 20 hours a week keeping up with coursework. Please be sure to plan your schedule accordingly, especially as you juggle coursework with work, travel, vacations, and managing other life events. Success is far from impossible. It's achievable, but it is very demanding. And please remember that by taking classes here through the SCPD at Stanford University, you're essentially putting yourself in a traditional university setting, just like in perhaps your undergraduate experience, you are a full-time student. We have the same expectations of our graduate students, and be prepared for a change. It's different than the professional or corporate world where you are thriving in today. We note that students at times and sometimes are coming in rusty. Some classes may be labeled introductory, but all the classes require knowledge of the prerequisite material. Please do not expect the class to include a refresher in prerequisites like probability, statistics, calculus, or programming. Be sure to brush up on the prerequisites before class starts.
Okay, so it's my turn now to talk about what you should be aware about and what you need to do prior to the start of your class. So preparation is key. One of the things that you will experience is when you apply and enroll in a course through SCPD, you will first of all gain an email that will basically say that you've been approved to take the course and what the next steps are. And this is what I'd like to talk you through, next steps. So once you've been approved to take the class, the first thing that you should do is set up a SUNET account. That stands for Stanford University Network Account. This is key to your study at the university and for managing yourself as a student. The student account allows you to do things like set up your email access, which is critical for communication throughout the course of your study, and also for managing contact information, etc. When you receive that email with next steps, please make sure you follow through the instructions on setting up a student account and make sure that that's completed. If you have difficulty with that, you can reach out to my team and we'll provide you some contact information at the end of this presentation. One of the other things that you should do to prepare for your course is to try and familiarize yourself as best as possible with the course schedule and the syllabus. You can usually gain this through the course teaching team in the first class, or if you wish and you need to have it before your class starts, you can reach out to my team and we can help you gain access to the course schedule and syllabus. You should also ensure that you try and familiarize yourself with if there's any required textbooks required for your course. If that is the case, again, let's make sure that you can get access to those textbooks prior to the start of class so that you're not in a situation where you have to order a textbook and wait for that to arrive and you receive that material a week or two into the start of your academic quarter. So let's make sure that you get that required textbook if you need it. You should also familiarize yourself with the student handbooks. They're on the SCPD website. If you're a non-degree option student, please look at the non-degree option student handbook, read through it. There's a lot of information there that's useful to your time as a student here. And equally, if you are an honors co-op student, there's a student handbook for that type of student as well that you can read through. Again, familiarize yourself with the type of student that you are and the things that you should experience as a student. One of the things you should also be aware about is the academic calendar. I cannot place enough emphasis on this. Please make sure that you familiarize yourself with the academic calendar. It's on the SCPD website. There's some key dates in that calendar that you should be aware about. Please take the time to look at it and make note of important academic deadlines which are highlighted. Like I say, if there's anything that you need to reach out to my team, the Student Client Services team, before the start of your class, feel free to do that. Any logistical questions you have, our contact information, it is on the website. We'll be happy to help and make sure you're fully prepared before your class starts. So in week one of your class, the first thing that will happen is you will attend online the first class section. In that class section, it's kind of like a point in time where you'll get information on how to access your course materials. That information will be communicated to you by the course teaching team. Things like how to access the course website, how to submit homework, how exams will be handled, that kind of thing. So please make sure that you log in for the first class in week one and familiarize yourself with how the logistics of the course will happen. Also try and familiarize yourself with communication channels. Some course teaching teams will like you to communicate via email, some prefer Google Hangouts, some prefer a discussion forum. So again, in that first class, that information will be provided to you. So keep an eye out for it and make a note of it. One of the things you'll also be required to do in week one is to designate an exam monitor. I'll talk a little bit more about exam monitoring in a few minutes, but you would need to designate an exam monitor. That's typically a person who will help with the logistics of the exam and, more importantly, to invigilate the exam. That's why we need to set up an exam monitor. And as I mentioned earlier on, the co-teaching team will also go through the class syllabus, the class schedule, and also identify any individual course deadlines that you need to be aware of. Within that class, they'll also identify, typically when homeworks are due, etc. Other things that you should try and review and try and educate yourself with is, looking at things like when are course breaks, when are holidays. Familiarize yourself with the course drop deadlines, withdrawal deadlines, etc. Again, that's important that you do that on week one so that you know as the academic quarter progresses what deadlines are coming up. When you're kind of preparing yourself for the course, again, make sure you take a look at the university-wide academic calendar, and then you can look at some university-wide type deadlines that you should be aware about. So please make sure that you can plan your weekly schedule around the classes and that you're aware of any deadlines that are due to come up. So day one, week one, what should you do? Basically, if you're a non-degree option student or an honors co-op student and you are remote to campus, the first thing you should do is log into your My Stanford Connection account, and in that way you can actually view your first class. Viewing your first class is important because it sets the scene for the rest of the academic quarter. Lots of information, as I've just said, will be presented to you by the course teaching team. Again, make note of that. There are every course teaching team is different in the way that they communicate and the way that they handle homework and exams. Please make sure that you communicate regularly with your course TA about that. As I said earlier on, some course teaching teams prefer a system called Piazza, some prefer something called Gradescope, some prefer a system called Canvas. Again, that information will be provided to you on day one of your class. Familiarize yourself with it and make sure that you kind of understand how the course will work for the rest of the academic quarter. Also, just one thing before we move on, please don't expect any kind of individualized messaging regarding questions that you post on a forum. For example, something like Piazza, you will post questions on it, other students will post similar questions, and what will happen is the course teaching team will reply to all of the students on a similar theme, okay? So typically that's what you'll see. Also, what you'll see is the course teaching team will also communicate any kind of specific questions to the group, not to you as an individual, so just be aware of that.
Sure. Let's talk a bit about the grading policy, right? It's each class has its own grading policy. Please be sure you understand the grading policy, and if you have any doubts, the best person to contact is, of course, the professor and the TA team, the teaching assistants, or all together. In certain classes, there may or may not be grading penalties for late submission of assignment, so please be aware of these and plan your schedule accordingly. Another interesting point is that we advise students to communicate with the TA to better understand your individual grade trajectory. Sometimes, especially early on in the class, you might receive a grade for an assignment and that grade might feel low, or it might introduce some doubts regarding your ability to achieve a certain grade in the class. We've seen that happen enough to advise you that if that happens, your best course of action is to communicate clearly and immediately with the teaching team and say, hey, I received this grade. Where does it take me? Where is my trajectory headed? Do I still have a good chance of getting a certain grade in the class? And based on the information you receive, you will be in best position to assess how much work you need to put into the class, how many hours, how to plan your schedule, and so on. Definitely do not make any assumptions regarding first few grades as to where you are getting in the class. It's important for us to note that here at the SCPD, we do not referee grading disputes. Any grading decision is made only by the teaching team, and we are purposefully setting ourselves aside and away from that process. This is something that happens within the classroom and we have no influence on it. Where do we have influence and what is our role is exactly what we should be talking about next, right? So John and our role here is to help in cases where there are certain circumstances that require intervention. Most typically, this happens when there's miscommunications. Please remember that we're all human, we're all making mistakes. The teaching teams might miscommunicate, their information might be misperceived the wrong way, right? So when those instances happen, please pull us into the conversation, help us be advocates for you. We welcome your emails. Do not hesitate to reach to us if you have any questions. It's always best to err on the side of over-communicating, and when you communicate early with us, you help us be better advocates on your behalf. Do not hesitate to contact us, and do not wait until it's a few days before the end of the class or it's right before an assignment is due to try and fix things. The sooner you communicate with us, the better we can be of help. Well, what's our culture? You know, it's interesting, especially with SCPD students who are coming back into academia after spending a few years in a professional setting. There is an adjustment that will happen. We ask everyone to be cognizant of the student-teacher relationship, which is different than the relationship you might be having with your colleagues at work or with your boss or supervisor. Please be attuned to the expectations and to the built-in expectations that are part of a university system. Email communications are so critical, and they can set the stage for success or they can be an impediment. We ask you to think before you click, and when you send emails to the teaching teams, please be respectful, clear, complete, concise, solution-oriented, and provide clarity in case time-sensitive issues are popping up that you need addressed. Emails can be a wonderful tool for communication, but whatever you communicate in emails can be easily misunderstood. So please do not send emails in haste in the middle of the night If you encounter a difficulty with a problem, take some time to think about it. Be sure that when you send an email to the teaching team, it presents you in the most favorable light. Office hours. Office hours are a critical component in the teaching experience here at Stanford. All teaching teams are offering office hours, and some may offer office hours in the evenings or on weekends. We advise all students to make an effort and to carve out time of your schedule to attend office hours, even during the workday, especially if you're experiencing challenges early on in the class. Office hours are challenging for most students because unlike our residential students, you cannot line up outside the professor's office or wherever the TA may be holding their office hours. So you have to be extra diligent in making time for office hours, and definitely let us know if you feel like office hours are not available to you for whatever reason. We'll be sure to connect with the TA teams and with the teaching team and to make sure that the schedule is available, understood, and accommodating. We also like to mention the fact and to remind that no two teaching teams are alike. If you have taken classes with us before, don't expect this quarter's class to behave or the teaching team to work in the same manner that a prior teaching team worked. Be sure to know the policy of the class you are in this quarter.
So let's talk about how to submit homework and how to set up an exam monitor. So first of all, before we talk about the logistics behind that, one of the first things I should place an emphasis on is for you to understand the grading policy, submission process, and deadlines for both homework and exams. It's very important that you familiarize yourself with these because every course is different. Grading policies can be different, the submission process can be different, and deadlines are different per course. One of the first things you should do is reach out to the course teaching team, ask the question directly to them, and they should be able to help you. It's very rare that SCPD can help you in gaining understanding about grading policies, submission process, deadlines, etc., because that is individual to the course teaching team, and it's they who you should communicate those questions to. Also, late submissions. If it should happen where you can't submit a homework on time or whatever might happen, you might be busy in work, whatever, please make sure you familiarize yourself with that policy with the individual course teaching team. There are grade penalties out there and there are late submission opportunities, but please, before you go down that route, make sure you communicate that, ask the question of the class teaching team, and make sure you know the policy. Again, with submission of homework, every course teaching team is different. You'll have a situation where you'll have one course teaching team will have you submit the homework directly to them via email. They may have you submit the homework directly to them via something called Canvas or Gradescope. Again, familiarize yourself with what the course teaching team wants in that respect. There are situations where a course teaching team will ask SCPD to handle the collation of homeworks from SCPD students. If that happens, that's fine. Please submit your homework directly to SCPD. There's an address where you can submit your homework on the SCPD website under homeworks. But please note that if you do that, you do not need to submit it to the course teaching team as well. So you either submit it directly to the course teaching team or SCPD, not both. There's no need to duplicate that. Okay, moving on to exam monitors. You need to set up or designate an exam monitor prior to your midterm or final. If your course doesn't have an exam, fine, you do not need to set one up. But if your course does have either a midterm or a final or both, then please make sure you designate one. Please don't delay in designating an exam monitor because we want to make sure you get ahead of that prior to the exam. We don't want you having to submit one at the 11th hour and being in a panic. So please make sure you prepare and find somebody that you feel you can work with directly and handling the logistics of the exam. It's mandatory, okay, for you to submit an exam monitor, even if you intend to come to campus. The situation typically happens where something happens in your workplace or there's a delay in travel to the campus and we see students not able to take the exam on campus. Please make sure you have an exam monitor, even if it's a backup that we can use in an emergency. If you intend to come to campus and take it here, we will not reach out to your exam monitor, but at least we have that person in place if needs be. One of those common questions that we get is, when is my exam and where is my exam? What I would ask you to do if you have that question is reach out directly to the course teaching team. They will have that information. SCPD isn't always party to when your exam is due or when you can take it. So I would ask you to communicate that question directly to the course teaching team. We're happy to advocate and ask that question on your behalf, but it's probably better if you reach out directly to them. And that way, then you'll gain information on when your exam is, how to take it, etc. So I would encourage you to do that. Next thing I want to talk about is course drops, course withdrawals, and incompletes. These are, I think, the three most critical components that you should be aware about when experiencing or going through a course at Stanford University. What is a course drop? Well, it's your ability to drop a course up to the end of the third week of instruction. Something may not be going right with the course, something might be happening in work, you might have a project or a family commitment or whatever it is. You have the ability to drop the course up to the end of the third week of instruction to get 100% tuition refund, okay? There is a specific deadline for the winter quarter, which is just around the corner, and the drop deadline for that quarter is January 26, 2018 by 5 p.m. Any course drop requests received after that will not be able to be processed, okay? So please make sure if you are considering dropping that you get your drop request in ahead of time. Please also note that for a course drop, there is a $100 course drop fee, okay? That is the situation for all course drops. Course withdrawals, what is a course withdrawal? Well, a course withdrawal is different from a course drop. Shouldn't confuse the two. Course withdrawal is where you're 4 weeks, 5 weeks into an academic quarter and something is not going right with the course, or maybe again, you have a commitment with work or your family or whatever, and you need to withdraw. Well, what happens with withdrawal is you basically, if you do withdraw, commit to that, you'll get a W, standing for withdrawal, denoted on your academic transcript. That's not a bad thing, okay? Withdrawing isn't a bad thing. It's your ability to basically back out of the course and to gain a W. Now, the great thing about a withdrawal or a W grade is that you can come back to the university at any point in time, repeat the course from the beginning, and if you do repeat it and successfully complete the course, the W grade will then be superseded with the grade that you get, okay? One other thing that's worth pointing out with a withdrawal, that there is no refund of tuition, okay? If you are an honors co-op student, if you withdraw, there is a per diem tuition rate refund, but again, you need to talk to us about how that applies. The winter withdrawal deadline is March 2nd, 2018, again by 5 p.m. That's a specific strict deadline. Course incomplete. A lot of students ask me what an incomplete is and how it works. This is kind of an unknown factor. A course incomplete is where you have a situation which is different to a drop or withdrawal, where you've completed at least 50% of the course work, not attended, I mean course work. If you've completed 50% of the coursework or more, and you find yourself again in a situation where you can't continue with the course for whatever reason, we can reach out to the course teaching team and request an incomplete status. Basically, that's like pausing the course, okay? You've completed so much coursework, you need to pause the course and come back and complete it at a different time. That's what an incomplete is. How does an incomplete work? You have to reach out to the specific course teaching team, TA or instructor, and request that. If they do consent an incomplete, that's great. What you'd have to do is send that consent to us in writing, typically via an email, so we can grade your course as an incomplete. You then have 1 academic year within which to return and restart the course. Not recomplete the course, start the course again, okay? So you start the course from the point that you left off and complete the coursework. Your I then, which is a grade that you get for an incomplete, will then be replaced by the grade that you gain when you successfully complete the course. That's how an incomplete works. There's information about incompletes, withdrawals, and drops on the Stanford University website and how they work. Remember, for an incomplete, the decision is ultimately the teaching team's decision. It's their consent that you need to get. Winter incomplete deadline is March 16th, 2018 by 5 p.m. Again, that's a specific strict deadline that you need to be aware of.
And John, just from my understanding, and because we get these questions so frequently, when a student has taken an incomplete and they come back in the following quarter, they have to start the class from the beginning, correct?
So not necessarily, not necessarily. That depends. You have some course teaching teams that will have you start from where you left off, but some will have you start again, depending on the situation.
Thank you for clarifying. So please be aware of that unique scenario. Be sure to understand the implications to you. And of course, once the incomplete request has been granted, work with us. We will make sure that we can advise you of when the next time the class is offered and so on. This is my least favorable slide to talk about, and it has to do with the honor code. The honor code at Stanford is system whereby the university trusts the student to conduct their academic work with integrity. Be that as it may, there are instances where students are cheating. Our opinion of that, of course, is that when you're cheating, the only person you're cheating is really you. And regardless of that opinion, in effect, the university is using various mechanisms to make sure that cheating is detected. These mechanisms are varied and they are effective, meaning we typically identify those events. And when a teaching team suspect a student of a cheating event, they forward it to the appropriate committee, which will then look at the case. SCPD does not get involved in these decisions. Our advice to you is don't do it. Of course, nobody comes in saying we'll do it. It often happens when time pressures and other factors get into play and cause people to engage in that behavior. Certainly, we advise do not do it, and it's just simply not worth it. John, what else can we tell students about this particular aspect?
Yeah, so my advice again is the same thing: is do the right thing. I would not advise you, kind of straying away from the honor code at all. So if an honor code violation does happen, typically the course teaching team detected that, as Sergey says, they have sophisticated systems out there that catch this kind of thing. What will happen then, that will get reported to an office on campus called the Office of Community Standards. The Office of Community Standards will then communicate that honor code violation to you, the individual student, and it is then your opportunity to represent what happened. The course teaching team will provide their information and evidence of what happened, and then the Office of Community Standards will work with both you, the student, the faculty of the course teaching team, and come to a determination on what should happen. In some cases, it could be as severe as an academic penalty. In some cases, it could be a lowering of the final grade. So every situation is different, but again, our advice to you is to follow the course teaching team's instructions and make sure that you're aware of the honor code and how you can best represent it.
Thank you, John.
So course evaluations. I cannot understate the importance of completing a course evaluation to you as a student enough. Course evaluation is important because this allows you to gain access to your final grade for your course early. It's really advantageous that you get access to your course grade early because I know a lot of you are working professionals and gaining a great grade is important for you gaining tuition reimbursement. So for you to get the grade early so you can put in your tuition reimbursement request, please make sure you fill out the course evaluation. Another great reason for filling out the course evaluation, it gives the university and the course teaching team great feedback on how you felt the course went. That always gives us, vital information, and it's a gift to get information on how to improve, the course experience, etc. So that's another great reason for filling it out. If you do not fill out the course evaluation prior to the end of instruction, which is typically the deadline for filling out a course evaluation, you would then have to be mindful of the date for the grade release date, which is typically 2 to 3 weeks after the close of instruction. So again, if you want to get hold of your grade early, so you can see what you got, progress on to your next course, or submit a reimbursement application, please fill out the course evaluation before the end of instruction.
Tuition reimbursement. So many of our students are benefiting from a tuition reimbursement program offered by their employers. We recommend and we suggest that if there are specific deadlines that your employer has set in place in terms of by when the grades have to be reported for you to receive the tuition reimbursement, please be aware of them and please compare those dates with your class date on which the grade may be available. Although this happens most frequently in the autumn quarter towards the end of the year, it's good to know what are the deadlines that your employer is considering when tuition reimbursement is concerned. Of course, we cannot know that unless you tell us, but certainly if you have any concerns regarding the policies in your workplace relevant to the specific class that you're taking, and you need our help in getting a grade a few days early, we certainly can accommodate that, provided that you let us know well ahead of time. So please be sure to be aware of those dates. It's one of the important aspects of keeping in of staying abreast of the classes, policies, and deadlines. Attending classes on campus is something that we hear a lot from students about. First of all students are welcome to visit campus, but if you want to join a class in person or take an exam on campus, please be sure to connect with your teaching team and get that approved ahead of time. The picture on this slide is actually from one of our larger auditoriums, and this is how when you're in a high capacity, high enrollment class, you might well be in this situation where there aren't enough seats in the auditorium. So if you're in a class where there are many students and you want to come to campus, be sure to check in with the teaching team and say, hey, how's the class looking? Will there be a seat for me? And of course, if you're coming in to take an exam on campus, that does not relieve you of the obligation to designate an exam monitor, because when exams are taken, we typically sit students separately, and exams are scheduled all over campus. So you really need to know where and when you need to be if that is your choice. In summary, thank you for joining us. Please, the following points are the ones that we would appreciate if you take to heart, right? Know your class policies, know your TA teams. Once the quarter starts, the teaching team is your first point of contact regarding any class-related questions, so communicate early and clearly. Do not hesitate to contact us at SCPD. You can find our contact information on the scpd.stanford.edu website. Any question that you have, we'll be happy to reply as quick as we can. The earliest we're aware of a problem or a challenge, the more we can help you. Please, as the quarter begins, clear your schedule. The more time you dedicate to studying, the more valuable your experience here will be. Thank you again for listening, and we both wish you a great quarter.
Thank you.